Thanks for being here today. I really appreciate you guys coming. I know this is a difficult time, and we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule and doing the work that needs to be done to be your best right now. We appreciate you and all the work you're doing. In this virtual workshop series, we hope to bring you the best practices of climate change education, support you by modeling innovative and fun ways to be engaging online, and create opportunities for you to connect with a professional community of climate change leaders and educators. So at throughout this presentation, we're going to share a lot of resources with you and tips. Hopefully that dinging will stop if you can hear it. And we're going to share this slide deck with you from this presentation, this workshop, and we'll also share the recordings with you as well. And I'll just introduce myself today. I'm Lindsay Kirkland. I'm the Climate Change Education Manager at Climate Generation. And I'm going to pass it off to my partner, Megan.
Great. So if you want to pass the slides forward too.
Yeah, that's me.
It's Lindsay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm Megan Weck, and I'm the Senior Education Coordinator at Climate Generation. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm coming to you from the land of the Dakota people. So this is a photo of my backyard, and we really encourage you to find your native land and put it in your name, so you can rename yourself by kind of clicking on the 3 dots that are on your video and go down to rename. If you're not sure of what native land you're joining from, you can go to this website here. It's native-land.ca, and check out the region of the country that you're joining us from, and share that as well. So at Climate Generation, we like to do land acknowledgments for our trainings and our events and our programming. We find that they're really important because it's a way to have us insert an awareness of Indigenous presence and land rights in everyday life. And it's what you could do in your classroom, in your educational setting, with people when you're doing specific events or programs. Like, it can be a really explicit way to recognize the history of colonialism and First Nations in our country. So also, as a climate change organization, we know that people of color and Indigenous communities are disproportionately impacted by climate change, and they may be forcibly removed from their homelands again as climate refugees. We're already seeing that here in the United States. So we also recognize that there's tremendous resilience and innovative climate solutions that are currently happening, created by these communities. So we also want to do a land acknowledgement because we know that there are amazing opportunities, solutions, creative ideas happening in these communities, and we need to recognize who these people are. And just a really good component of seeing how this connects to climate change, and what we're trying to do here with your students and with the people that you're going to interact with. So within that link that we shared earlier, native-land.ca, there's actually a teacher's guide that you can check out. The link is right there. We're going to share these slides with you momentarily, so we can get you that link. But the guide is really helpful and really helps you kind of say if you're comfortable doing this, if you've been doing it for a while, or if this is something new for you. Acknowledging territory can be as simple as what we just did this morning or this afternoon. So I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of Dakota people here in Minnesota, where we're coming from. So if you would all share what native land you are joining from today in the chat. And you can find the chat by going down to the bottom of your Zoom screen and clicking on chat, and go ahead and type in what native land you're joining us today. Awesome. So it looks like we've got a variety of folks. Some from Dakota, where we are in the Midwest. Awesome, thank you all for sharing. And then I just wanted to note as well that if you would prefer to have closed captioning on this webinar with us this afternoon, you can access that by going to, at the bottom of your screen, which should say more, and you can click on closed caption. It's with Rev, and it should just start showing up on the bottom of your screen. So if you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat. We can get you going on that. I'll turn it over to Lindsay.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks everyone for getting settled in. Sorry if you hear a dinging while I'm talking. Megan's going to be watching for participants joining us as we go. But for those of you just joining, just please mute yourself and turn your video on if you like. So today what we're going to do is we're going to spend 10 minutes getting grounded in our theme of science and other ways of knowing. Megan is going to lead us through an activity that we're going to do as a group, well, individually as much as, and then as a group together afterwards. And at the end, we're going to spend some time in small group discussion and a large group share out using some literature resources to connect with these themes. So to get us grounded in the theme today, oh geez, I obviously want to start with a question. And this question, I'm asking you through some software called Poll Everywhere. Poll Everywhere is a really handy software that you can use in your classrooms or in your learning environment to gather information. And I just put the link in the chat. And your question today, to get us started, is what helps you know the world? What helps you know the world? And what you can do is click on the link in the chat. It'll open a browser. And it should go right to the question. And as you enter your response, it's going to live populate on my screen, hopefully. And I'll do an example here as you guys get started. I see some answers populating now, which is great. And I'm just going to wait just a moment to allow those to pop up for us. Great, thanks for sharing your answers. We'll wait another moment. So this is a word cloud that's being generated automatically. And so the bigger the words are, the more times they're said or entered in as an answer. So what we can see here is experience is being said by many people in our audience today. Senses are also something that's coming up as big letters. We also have some on the smaller letters like faith, direct, immersion, listening, travel, values, elders, that's a good one, wisdom, talking to people. Yeah, so we really do see a spectrum here of, and I see Heidi's answer in the chat, getting out in nature. Thanks, Heidi. That's a great way to share if you're unable to get Poll Everywhere to work for you. And so what we see here is there's a wide variety of ways that we engage with the world to know more about it. And we can generally call these things ways of knowing. Okay? Ways of knowing has a specific definition, of course, but it's very difficult to define in a short period of time. So basically, ways of knowing are the methods through which knowledge becomes apparent to you and ways that you interact with the world to make meaning of the environment, or even we can call it a phenomena. And we're going to define that word later on in our session today. So move on for this. Thanks for sharing. So two ways of knowing that we're going to explore in our workshop today are traditional ecological knowledge and Western ecology. And you might have heard some of these words before. They might sound new to you today. Unfortunately, I'm not going to provide an exact definition of either of these words. These are complex, difficult concepts that have their own culture around them, and they have their own community of people that have helped create these things. And so what I've done instead is created word clouds for you. The traditional ecological knowledge word cloud is on the left, And the Western ecology word cloud is on the right. And I just want you to take a second to read the words around each of those concepts. So if we look at the traditional ecological knowledge word cloud, the pink bubbles, we see words like beings, lifeway, survival, generations of knowledge, stories, and culture. These words were given to us by Melanie Montano. She's an enrolled member of the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, which is Ojibwe. And she's the traditional ecological knowledge outreach specialist at the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. We'll have an opportunity to explore some of her work in our activities today. And if you look at the word cloud on Western ecology, we have words from the Journal of Ecological Society of America and my personal experience as an insect ecologist for the last 10 years. And we see words like systems, interrelatedness, organisms, standardization, measurement, and biodiversity. And I'm showing you these two word clouds together today, not in an effort to show which is better or which is correct, but rather in an effort to learn how they are similar and how they are different and how they come together to create a holistic perspective of a phenomena or allow us to think about new ways of exploring a phenomena. So your task right now is to find two things in these word clouds that are similar and two things that are different. You can put those in the chat. So two things in these words that are similar and two things that are different. Thanks for putting your answers in the chat. I see them there. I'll read some of them out as they come in. So some folks are recognizing that observations are the same across. The environment is the same across. Some things that are different. Spirits and culture are not in or are in TEK, while where organisms and standardization are in Western ecology. Different beings versus organisms. I don't want to use the word versus, but as compared to. Difference, John Olson, generations of knowledge in TEK versus new science. New science is relatively subjective, what is new, but relative to one another. Great, thanks. Different, spirits, definitely. Thanks for that, you guys. And we're gonna have an opportunity to explore this more deeply, so I'll move on from this. So the systematic removal of Indigenous people from their lands and their loss of ways of knowing have dramatically affected our ways of knowing and interacting with the world. For example, in Australia, Indigenous people have done some form of cultural burning on the land for thousands of years. And in recent centuries, cultural burning has been outlawed and Indigenous people have been forcibly removed from their traditional lands. So we've lost their culture and their way of knowing, and which would have informed our way of stewarding the land. It's only recently that Western scientists have begun to realize the importance of other ways of knowing in managing environmental phenomena like wildfires. Wildfire ecologists and management practitioners are seeking the wisdom of tribal nations in California and Australia as recent examples to inform their methods for better understanding and maintaining the increasing intensity and frequency of wildfires, especially as those things become exacerbated by climate change. There's a link to this article. It's a really great read. We can share it with you later on. Organizations like Melanie Montano's organization, Great Lakes and Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, they're bringing together scientists, policy analysts, and TEK knowledge holders to create climate change vulnerability assessments around culturally important species or beings. TEK and Indigenous ways of knowing are particularly important for understanding long-term change in climate change or in climate. and for assessing impacts along long time scales because of the multi-generational knowledge that's passed down in stories, lifeways, and language. So in this project in particular, Cliffwick staff interviewed tribal elders and TEK knowledge holders to determine which species to assess or beings to assess, then used a tool-based Western scientific method that assessed the vulnerability of those species to climate change. So they were able to merge these two ways of knowing. And you're going to be given an opportunity to use this tool and view it later on. So this is a lot of information. I recognize that in a very short amount of time. So I want to pause, and I'm going to ask you to reflect, and then ask you to ask questions if you want. So we're going to take 30 seconds here, and if any questions are coming up for you at this moment, you can put them in the chat. And we still see people coming in. We're happy if you're just joining us. Great. Okay, if I don't see any questions here, but if you do have any, feel free to put them in the chat, and we are going to probably respond to them at the end of the workshop. Megan, did you want to add something?
No, this is great.
Great. Sorry, I just saw you unmute yourself. All right. So before we move on to Megan's activity, I want to do something for you. I want to make a classroom connection here. And I know that talking about these big ideas is inspiring. And we always want to be learning new things, but I really want to make it clear what we're asking you right now with this learning. And we are not asking you to do TEK in your classroom or in your learning environment unless you have a deep partnership and relationship with tribal nation. Okay, that's a different experience. TEK is generated and held by tribal elders and people of tribal nations. It is a passed down life way that's based in culture, stories, and language. Okay, the way that educators who are not a part of a tribal nation use TEK is to be aware of and acknowledge Indigenous people's leadership in stewarding the land and making climate change solutions with their TEK knowledge. Okay. And I'm reading from the slides here because I think it's really important. Your job is to use TEK as a guide for reimagining what investigations and data collection look like in your classroom or in your learning environment. I know we have a lot of environmental educators here today, so it might not be a classroom, might be a camp. And your job is to be sensitive to other ways of knowing and work to incorporate a spectrum of investigative and reflective methods into your classrooms and learning environments. And we can use TEK as a guide. We cannot perform TEK in a way. And I see questions coming in, so that's great. Keep them coming in the chat if they come up. So one great tool that we'll share with you, it's called Teaching STEM in Ways That Respect and Build upon Indigenous People's Rights. And you'll have access to these slides. We'll share it later on. So that's there for you, and they give you some great tips. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Megan to get our activity started. We will have some time to address these questions at the end of the presentation. So thanks for sharing them.
Great. So kind of with the knowledge base that Lindsay has brought to us here today, we're going to transition to how we can apply this new information into an educational setting by modeling, doing it with you all here today. So I have a question to pose to you to get us started, again, with the Poll Everywhere software. So you can go to the pollev.com with the link there that Lindsay just put in and answer the question, what can we use to investigate the world? So earlier we asked you what you use to know and understand the world. These are maybe tools or things that you could use to investigate the world. So if you want to just put your answers in, and it'll populate as a list this time. It's like lots of folks are saying senses. We have someone in the chat saying binoculars. Awesome. Stories. Gut reactions. Immersion in different ecosystems and cultures. Questions. Love that. You can investigate the world with questions. The feel and smell of the air from the chat. Senses. Awesome. All right, tools. Yeah. So different ways that we can investigate the world for sure, and understanding that there are multiple ways of knowing that we can fall back on to investigate the world. We want to jump into some of those coming up here for this activity. But I want to go over kind of two concepts that some of you might be familiar with and have used before in your teaching. We find them really great ways to teach about climate change. And the first one is phenomena. Some of you might have seen this because you are a science teacher, and the next generation science standards are big on phenomena. But we find that this is a really great way to teach science because it involves kind of an inquiry-driven way to look at the concepts that are happening in our world and ask really good questions and use our senses and our ways of knowing to find the answers and the evidence. So a lot of things that we've already been talking about. So phenomena, for those of you who need a refresher, they're observable events that occur in the universe that we can use our knowledge to explain or predict. Phenomena can also be problems in the world that we can use our science, engineering, and other ways of knowing to help us solve. So again, if you see problems, you see the connection to climate change there. And then the goal is really to build knowledge that is helps us generate ideas based on evidence that can explain and predict phenomena or things that are happening in our world. So again, we're focusing, shifting the focus from, we're going to talk about sea level rise today, to figuring out why the sea levels are rising, thinking about what is happening with this phenomena in our Earth and our climate that is making this happen, asking questions to get to the topic at hand. Another concept that I want to name here is phenology. So some of you might have used this before. We find it really is a great way to study climate change because phenology is the study of seasonal change, right? So we're studying the cyclic and seasonal nature, look at that word there, phenomena. So it's the nature cycle of these awesome, cool things that we get to witness happening in our world. And especially relating to climate, plant, and animal life. So this photo here is from the Porcupine Mountains in Michigan in the UP. And we have a phenomena here that is phenology, the changing of the leaves, right? So I would love you all to right now put in the chat, what is a phenological phenomenon that might be happening right now that you could share? So it's the end of September. We're joining from all different places in the country. Go ahead and put in the chat, what is a phenomenon that you can witness right now? And Lindsay, if you want to advance the slide there, I think the question's on there for folks. And possibly if the phenomenon you want to share is affected by climate change, you could even add that on there. So I'm seeing daylight hours changing, temperature change, changing leaves in the vineyards, wildfires, monarch migration, birds migrating, people wearing warmer clothes, for sure, ripening apples, the arrival of the first white-throated sparrows and juncos. How beautiful. The onset of budding. Awesome. So in thinking about the phenomena that you're listing here, just take a moment to think about maybe what kind of data or evidence could you gather to show what is happening? Where would you look for that? What would be the most, you know, kind of insightful way to find how to prove that this is happening beyond what you're witnessing? Is it something you can measure? Is it a story you might talk to somebody about? Is it your own observations that you're seeing? So where would you find this information, and what kind of data would you want to collect? Great. So we are going to share actually this slide deck with you. So we can jump into the activity. So in the chat, if you want to click on that link right there, you should all get access to this slide deck. If you want to open it up and go ahead and go to slide 18. Link's not working. Oh, is that the wrong one? Oh, that's not the full link. Sorry, here you go. It went on 2 pages. Try that. Sorry about that. There you go. Looks like folks are getting in. Check out slide 18. So today, we're going to invite you all to find evidence of a changing climate by exploring phenomena. So I'm going to give you 3 different ways that you can do this. And I'm going to invite you to choose just 2 of them, because we're going to give you 10 minutes to do this. If you only get to 1, that's fine. You can go back. If you get to all 3, that's awesome too. But we're going to explore phenomena of a changing climate by, the first one is using quantitative measures. So if you click on the link right there that says temperature indicators figures, we can also put that in the chat. This is a figure set from Climate Generation's Next Generation Climate Curriculum that shows indicators of temperature change and the phenomena that go around that we can study. So that is one of your options, is to check out those figures, pick one of them, and figure out what is the data telling you, and what can you find, and what kind of picture can you paint of a changing climate. The second thing that we can invite you to do to find evidence of a changing climate is read a story about someone's observation of a certain species. We invite you to click on the vulnerability assessment, that link right there in 2A. This is from the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission that Lindsay was talking about, their vulnerability assessment. So within this PDF, you can check out the different species that they found were vulnerable to climate change. And I want you all to concentrate on the blue box that's within each species. That's going to give you the real experience and personal account of what people have seen that is changing. So what did you learn from that is the second one. And then the third option is you can find evidence of a changing climate by exploring phenomena, by making observations of the world around you at this moment in time. So this might be a fun one if you want to get outside and off your screen for a little bit. We invite you to step outside, just take a pause and reflect and make some noticings and observations of what you can see, hear, smell, and notice where you are right now on September 30th, 2020 in your location. So this is just, making some observations maybe of phenology of the changing seasons, what you can find. And then we invite you to compare what is happening today with historical records. So there's a couple links there. We have fall temperature trends and seasonal warming from Climate Central. You can also just find some of your own as well. So that is the activity for today. Go ahead and jump into those resources. Go ahead and go outside. I'm going to invite you to do 2 of the 3 if you can. And I would invite you all to be back in 10 minutes. So that'll be at 6:41 Central Time. And let me know if you have any questions. Go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll see you in 10 minutes. Yeah, so as folks are coming back, if you want to start your video again so that we know you're back, you can keep muted. And we have a few reflection questions on slide 19. No, what is it?
Yeah, 19.
19. That you can take a look at. It's also on the screen. So hopefully you're able to get to figuring out a little bit more about how these resources help us with our ways of knowing and finding evidence for climate change and phenomena in our world. So the first question is just, what evidence did you gather when exploring how climate change is affecting our world? What does a narrative style of data tell you that's different than numerical, if you were able to get to one of those? And how do these data support one another to make a holistic picture? So you can individually journal on a paper and pen or something digital. Just kind of reflect on these questions and what the activity prompted for you. And maybe some of the evidence that you gathered kind of made you want to find out more information. Maybe made you question some things as well. So we invite you to just dig deeper into other resources that you know to find more evidence and more knowledge and more answers. But really with these three activities that we offered to you today, we really just wanted to show some great resources, but also just understanding that there are different ways of knowing and that we can collect data using different ways of knowing and building this narrative that kind of gives us the evidence for what is happening to our world right now. We know that students learn in a variety of ways. We know that hands-on is fun if you're able to get outside and feel the air on your skin, or if you're more data-driven and you can get numbers, maybe students are more into that, or thinking of like being, learning about a different perspective. Maybe you were able to get in the vulnerability assessment and read about someone else's experience. So all of these are just a step into what we hope you will then build upon, thinking about how you could use this in adapting to what you're already doing, or as a starting point, or however you would want to. But just to kind of get thinking about the different ways of knowing. All right, so with that, we have another poll everywhere question for you. And that is, what new concept did you learn during the activity? If you want to go to that same link that is in the chat and submit your answers. What new concept did you learn during the activity? TK, awesome. Traditional ecological knowledge, combining narrative and data-based evidence. Perfect. Again, the narrative and the numerical connection. Value of narrative. Yeah, and I think that we're trying to show too, as maybe environmental educators or even science teachers, that narrative does have a place in the science classroom. So hopefully these resources will help you do that. Intergenerational understanding of phenomena, yeah. Using data to support the narrative. Great, thanks for sharing. And I'll turn it over to you, Lindsay.
Excuse me, thanks, Megan. And thanks for everyone for sharing your thoughts and taking that time. We know it's fast to do these activities. We wanted to give you guys a chance, well, people, not guys, people, a chance to discuss in small groups. And again, with this idea, and I'm really glad that this came up for you all, the idea of using narrative as a way to support data or as a way to create a holistic perspective by building context. And so we're going to move to small groups, and these I have a couple prompts for you, but they're not prompts in the way you might expect. We've been asking you a lot of questions, but for this discussion, I'm going to read a passage out of a climate fiction novel called The Marrow Thieves, and it's by Cherie Demoline. She's an Indigenous writer, an Indigenous person who's an author. And this book is a fictional narrative about young Indigenous people surviving an apocalyptic future. And so I'm gonna read the quote for you now, and then I'll tell you the directions. And I'm gonna start breakout rooms for you all. So here's the quote. Try not to move your emojis yet. After the rain started and the lands shifted so that some cities fell right into the oceans, people had to move around. Diseases spread like crazy. People got sad. One of the ways the sadness came out was when they slept. They stopped being able to dream. So I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, about 4 people per. In just a moment, a little bubble will pop up and you just say, go to breakout room. And I want you to follow the prompts on slide 21 and 22. And if you need help, there's a little button you can push help and we'll come help you out. Okay, ready? Here we go. I'll bring you back in about 10 minutes probably. Might end up giving them a little less time than 10 minutes so we have enough to share.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So maybe at the
I think even like 5.
Okay.
But did people get jumped out of breakout rooms? I don't know what just happened.
Nia was just assigned without anyone in her room, so I'm going to change her.
Oh, bummer. Sorry about that. I just didn't see anyone in participants. I'm like, oh, what happened?
Yeah. Okay, there we go. You should be getting a new message, Nia. Hopefully. Oh, it's not coming up. Do you want to share with us? I mean, you can still participate, of course. So you should have editing access to these slides.
Yes. And we're just sharing our reaction to the passage you read?
Yeah. Do one of the emojis represent a feeling that quote makes you feel?
Yeah, I think the open mouth sobbing.
Yeah.
Me too. Was the one that got to me. So
is there a word, an emotion that you can name that goes with that sobbing?
I guess it's like a sense of helplessness. Which for me is frustrating because like as a climate change educator, I try really hard to avoid interacting with the topic in a way that leaves people feeling helpless and sobbing. Like I try really hard to leave people feeling empowered and motivated. And yet like there is a real climate grief is real. And so it's like it's frustrating to have to deal with that feeling because that's not where I want to leave people. Like I never want to leave people there, but it's also real. So
well, I agree with you. It's very hard. I always feel like we need to start with the emotions, and if that's, painful emotions, of course. And so with that, we can move to the number 22, which is using those feelings and emotions. And what we've learned today is to think of a climate change connection. So what things are represented in this passage and that come out for you?
oh man, I mean, there's so much, I mean, here that is just,
Yeah.
I mean, so much of this is already happening with the climate refugees and disease. I mean, like it's all current and present right now. Even my cat had to cry out, yes, Desi, I did, it's so sad. My cat is very vocal. Yes, Desi. But I think the thing, I don't know, like, this might be me just like reading into this passage too much, but I think the thing that is the saddest thing is that the way the author talks about how when they slept, they no longer dreamed. And I think for me, I look at that as being like the saddest thing that could happen to us when faced with all of this is that we stop dreaming of new ways of being. We stop dreaming of new solutions. We stop innovating. Like, not literal dreams, but the dreams that allow us to grow and change. And that's what I don't want to happen. I don't want people to be faced with so much sorrow that they stop thinking about how can we fix this. So that's, I think the saddest thing would be if people stopped innovating and dreaming about a new tomorrow.
I agree. Yeah. So then getting to the large scale share out, if you were going to set an intention for going forward from this workshop, what would it be? You can think about it and we'll share out as a group.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey everyone, we're just waiting for folks to come back from their breakout rooms. Thanks for participating. I know that's fast. You can continue to work on your slides. Hi everyone. Thanks for participating in those really quick breakout rooms. I know that's fast. I understand it's hard to break away from that connection. You can continue adding your thoughts to these slides, but we have to move on because we want to be respectful of everyone's time today. So the last part of our reflection, I'm going to have to leave with you. And so I hope in what we're seeing here is, as we look back on slide 21, we see a lot of sadness, heartbreak, feelings of hopelessness, and maybe those words came up for you. We were speaking with Nia, one of our participants here, and how it's very hard to acknowledge that, especially when we all care so deeply about the environment and our world and our people. And although it's hard to admit that we have these feelings of grief and trauma, it's important to admit them and to move through them. And so thinking about starting with emotions, moving to practical connection to our content, which we did in slide 22. I hope you saw some connections between the quote and your feelings and the content that we covered today. And the final piece of this reflection is always leave with an intention. What is your intention to do with this information that you got today? So in slide 23, your homework, if you want to add, is set an intention. What's a concept you're going to pursue more? What are you going to do with your students now that you know about this? What are you going to do with your peers and your colleagues? How are you going to participate more deeply with us if you choose to or not? So you can feel free to share that out. In the last few minutes, Megan's going to share a few resources with you and just make sure you understand how to find that in this slide deck. And so this slide deck will stay available to you after this presentation.
Yeah. So if you want to put your intentions on slide 23, or you can throw them in the chat as well. But I just wanted to highlight some resources. It's on slide 24, and kind of the resources we've used throughout the workshop today, and additional ones you can find later on. There's some books here. So The Marrow Thieves, obviously, that we just heard an excerpt from, and a few others. The video there is from Melanie Montano, and it's entirely about traditional ecological knowledge and the work that Glyphwick is doing with their vulnerability assessments. This assessment was from 2018. There is now a second assessment. It has not been released yet, but stay tuned for that. So we'll have more updated information from Glyphwick. An activity I wanted to highlight is called GWOW, Guiding for Tomorrow. It's from our friends at University of Wisconsin Extension, and they partner a lot with Glyphwick. So that link is in slide 24, but it is a really great way for place-based education and taking kind of a cultural practice and finding how climate change impacts that. And then like Lindsay is saying, these intentions or solutions, we also want to look for, not only the causes and impacts of climate change, but the solutions. So two resources I wanted to highlight are the NOAA Climate Resilience Toolkit. So that has some great adaptations for climate change, kind of looking at it as scientific ecological knowledge. And then again, from Glyphwick, we have a new resource that talks about climate adaptation, and it's the Tribal Climate Adaptation Menu. And that's really using traditional ecological knowledge to see how we can adapt and create solutions to climate change. So check those out too after this. And then we also want to make sure that you all know about our Teach Climate Network that we have at Climate Generation. So some of you joining today might already be a part of it. If not, you can go to slide 25 and click on that link and fill out the form to sign up. You will get a monthly e-newsletter in your inbox with Teach Climate tips. And new this year, we have an online hub. So we have a place for people to connect and interact with each other, find more resources and content, and join our new program that we have happening throughout each month called Ask the Expert that Lindsay's going to talk about.
Yeah, great, thanks. Always trying to search for my mute button. I understand it's 1 o'clock and if you have to go, we understand. So the Ask an Expert program is a chance for you to connect and to learn about what experts are from a cultural perspective. So, you know, Western science might identify experts as people at the peak of their career, or those that give lectures at the front of a classroom, but other ways of knowing in other cultures don't identify experts in the same way. And at Climate Generation, we're seeking out different opportunities for you to engage with people that you might not consider experts. And in September, we had Melanie Montano and Rob Kroll come from the climate change program at Glyphwick, so the organization we've been using their materials from, and they talked about what it means to be an expert, and they call it knowledge holder from a TEK perspective, and what it means to be a scientist that works with tribal nations. So if you want to jump into the hub, you have to be signed up for the Teach Climate Network, so you can do that, and then we'll send you an email on how to get in there. And I just share 2 more things with you before we leave. Climate Generation has a suite of curricula that are all free to you. They explore some of these concepts. They're standards supported, research supported, and they're interdisciplinary. So you can check them out on our website. And then at the end of October, we're hosting our next workshop, which is all about supporting youth leaders. We're having youth come and talk to us about how to engage diverse youth audiences, how to inspire civic engagement in your classroom, and sending you away with virtual resources to connect youth to the climate justice movement and climate change action movement. Yeah, and that's what we have for you today. So, you know, thanks for participating. This seems so fast for me. I'd love to talk about this forever with you guys. If you want to stay on or have a few questions, I know we didn't get to your questions. I'm sorry about that, but I'd be happy to stay on for a few minutes and talk to you if you'd like that.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It was a pleasure. Have a good rest of your day.